Hey everybody, Robbie with Robbie's Reptiles. I got a question earlier this evening about how I decide what geckos to pair together. I've briefly touched on this in the past, and today I figured I would go ahead and dive deeper into it. So let's go ahead and talk about it. Crested geckos are polymorphic. Now, what polymorphic really means isn't that anything that you pair together is going to be completely random. That's not how it works at all. What polymorphic means is that in the wild, in their natural state, there are many different forms of the wild type. So in the wild, there are some with red dots. In the wild, there are some that are brown. There are some that have stripes. That's polymorphic. When you look at something like a ball python in the wild, there is only one wild type. There is no variation between that because evolution didn't have any other option than this wild type. This is the only thing that evolution deemed to be survivable. While with crested geckos, because they live on an island, they didn't have a lot of competition. The evolution there is a lot more lenient, and through evolution, they allowed for other types of colors and mutations to exist naturally, and it didn't serve any sort of detriment to their survival in the wild. So that's what polymorphic means. Polymorphic does not mean that when you pair a crested gecko to a crested gecko, all the babies are going to be completely random and you can't control anything. That's not true at all. So we have this crested gecko right here. This is, I still don't have a name for her, so right now I just call her Chadette. She just laid Chad babies. Now, if we compare Chad with Chadette, we can compare and see why I paired them together. Chad has a lot of beautiful yellow hues to his color. He also has not that dark of a base color. It's a pretty deep lavender, I would say, or maybe just a really deep gray, not necessarily black. Her, on the other hand, she does have a black base color. She also has almost 100% coverage on her laterals, which is her extreme harlequin showing through. She has great head structure. Chad has decent head structure. So why did I pair them together? Well, they both have the same relative traits. They both are sort of harlequins, they both are drippy, and they both are yellow with a darker base color. However, she has much better extreme harlequin markings than he does. He's more of a drippy, maybe white wall, I guess you could say, but he's not white, so it wouldn't be that. I think that pairing Chad with her and their babies would be able to improve upon what they have. The reason that I paired them together was because they have complementary features. She has better coverage, he has more appeal. What's the word? Chad has just a better look to his pattern, but she has more coverage and better head structure, and she's much heavier. I think that their colors are going to pretty much stay the same in the babies, but I'm hoping to improve upon contrast and overall coverage. Now, why wouldn't I try to pair Chad to something totally different? Well, that's because you're going to end up getting a hodgepodge of mediocre babies by doing that. You might get a couple that are really nice, but the problem with pairing things that don't have complementary features is that the babies are going to be subpar at best. So let's go ahead and show you an example of a pair that you should never do. So we're going to look at something like one of my Kevin females, and we're going to pair it to, in this hypothetical situation, my super Dalmatian male that is brown. Now, there's a million reasons why you would never want to do this kind of pairing, but let's go ahead and start with the first. I think it's a Cardinal Sin, and I will be doing a video on this in the future. It is a Cardinal Sin to breed a patterned gecko with a super Dalmatian that is patternless, because when you pair those two together, you're going to get a bunch of babies that are muddy, mixed up pattern with Dalmatian, and no one's going to buy them for a proper price, and you're going to end up bringing down the overall value of crested geckos, and it's just not a good time. The reason you don't want to pair these together is because you're just going to get a bunch of ugly babies. Because when breeders are looking for good investment geckos, they are never going to buy a gecko that has pattern and also is covered in dots, because it just shouldn't be crossed. It's like using bleach and ammonia while you're cleaning your kitchen. You should never mix those because you'll die. And essentially the same thing happens with crested geckos. It doesn't, but take my word for it. Now, however, if we look at this other male that I have lying around, he's more of a Halloween harlequin. A lot of haws there. Those have more complementary features than pairing something like an extreme harlequin to a super Dalmatian. Now we can look at like lily whites, for example. We have my greatest lily white, Gigachad. In a perfect world, I would pair him to all of my female lily whites. However, that would lead to leucistics and they would die, and that would be cruel. So of course I'm not going to do that. But we have Gigachad, so what are some different ways that we can try to improve upon Gigachad? I know there's very few. The first that I can think of would be the size. Now, we do have this other female named Spider Wolf that I got from Supernova Exotics over in Canada. She is a great example of some way that we can improve upon what Gigachad already has to offer. She also has complementary colors. She's black and white, but she has way better head structure and she's 65 grams. While Gigachad is still young, he's only 38 grams, he isn't that large bodied as she is. She's also proven, and it would be a good pairing. She's already been paired to my monochrome male this year, but next year she will be paired to Gigachad when he knows what he's doing. So again, let's go ahead and really break down this pairing. We have Gigachad, which has beautiful laterals. He has even these really interesting pink tones on his dorsal, and he has incredible coverage and bright paper whites. She also has paper white laterals and dorsal, but she also has a pitch black base color just like him. He has a little bit of a tricolor to him, but not so much. So the goal of these babies, I would say, would be to hopefully hatch out lily whites that are solely black and white without any of that tricolor, or maybe we might even get a few that are black and white with that little bit of pink on the dorsal, essentially just trying to eliminate the tricolor-esque features that Gigachad has. That's another way that us breeders make our decisions on what to pair to what, because we're seeing these certain features and we know that if we pair Gigachad to Spiderwolf, at least one or two of the babies are probably going to be the best outcome that we had in mind. So we'll move forward with that pairing. Then we will hold back the one or two that we think are the best example of what we had in mind. We'll raise them up, and then we'll find other complementary geckos and pair those to hopefully, through selective breeding, reach the pinnacle of a pure black and white gecko. Now, this isn't even touching the idea of introducing a new morph to a new morph or a new morph to an old morph, such as Xanthic to lily whites, monochromes to lily whites, cappuccinos to lily whites, melanistics to lily whites. This is an entirely other different type of topic because it is uncharted territory. So recently, in the past few years, we discovered cappuccinos, and by we, I mean the whole group of the whole hobby as a collective. We discovered cappuccinos and we paired them to a lily white. What we ended up getting was frappuccinos, which are a mix of this brownish grayish gecko with these kind of really creamy expressions of lily white. And it kind of looks like a frappuccino, I guess, with the whipped cream. So we ended up getting frappuccinos. That's really cool. So then what would you pair to a frappuccino? I do not know personally, because I don't know can you pair a frappuccino to a frappuccino? If you pair a frappuccino to a cappuccino, what are the offspring like? Have you already gotten melanistics as show lily? Because there would be 3 different genes at play there. You'd have a 25% possible chance of getting a melanistic. You'd have a 50% chance of getting a cappuccino with an on top 25% chance of one of the babies being a lily white. And then you would have to break that down even further to have the possibilities of having a melanistic that's also lily white, to have a cappuccino that's also lily white, to have a cappuccino that isn't lily white and isn't superform, and to have normals, because you could still possibly hatch out normals from that pairing. That is how complicated genetics can get when it comes to making these pairings. But we all need to be at the forefront of these discoveries. So what we've done already, all the other existing more so traits, such as extreme harlequin, super dalmatian, things like that, we've already explored, and we know what you can relatively expect out of birth. I can make a more in-depth video about all the different morphs and what they are, but for now, just understand you want to try to pair complementary features together, or find one beautiful gecko's weak point, find another gecko that its strength is whatever that weak point is. Then you can hope that when you pair the babies together, you get roughly 1, maybe 2 babies that have exactly what you had in mind and were the perfect outcome. So that's kind of what I have in mind when I do all of these pairings. When it comes to something like monochrome, I'm pairing to everything to see and discover how it reacts to all of it. That's a whole different topic, which I can make a video on if you guys want. When it comes to super dalmatians, from my understanding, you just want to get as many dots as possible paired with as many dots as possible, and then hopefully they have really big dots. If you can get really big dots with a lot of them paired to a lot of really big dots, then you get a lot of really big dots. That's just kind of my general understanding of it. I think that would be a good way to go about it. I am still working with them. This is going to be my first year breeding super Dalmatians and confettis. So if there's any Dalmatian specific breeders, let me know if I'm on the right track or if I'm on the wrong track. I am not 100% sure, but I will be figuring it out this year. Anyway, guys, that's it for today's video. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe and all that YouTube mumbo jumbo, and I'll see you guys in the next video.